we see verse 15, it says, so the wall was completed on the 25th of Elul in 52 days. That was a record. So what happened is that, if you look carefully, verse 15 begins with a so, which draws a conclusion from what preceded. So you find that what's going on, it is saying that the wall was completed. Now, you would have remembered all the things that they tried to do to stop the wall from going forward. Yet still, Nehemiah and the people, they persisted, and because of that, the wall was completed in record time. The wall was completed in 52 days. And based on what this says, this happened around August, which is kind of good because we are almost at August, and they finished the wall. Very interesting. Now, let's read verse 16. Verse 16 reads, when all our enemies heard about this, all the surrounding nations were afraid and lost their self-confidence because they realized that this work had been done with the help of our God. There's no way that this could have been completed without God's help. One of the first things we want to remind you of is this. Anything that we are doing, we need God's help. You can't make any success without God. And the text is saying that. So what we see, the effect upon the nations. First of all, when people realized that the walls were completed, if they knew, I don't know if they knew, all the various things that Tobiah and Sanballat tried, that fear gripped the nations. They became afraid because they're saying, how comes these guys can finish it under so much pressure? Can I tell you that when you're faithful to God, regardless of how difficult the situation is, and you will pursue in that situation, and God give you victory, persons have to wonder. Yes. Because some are going to wonder, how did you come through this? How did you make it through? Well, the simple reason is, if we are committed to Christ, and we follow what God says, no matter how difficult it seems, no matter how difficult things seem, God is going to bring you through. Don't it? Yeah. And this is what happened in this case. And what happened even more is that it said the nations, they were deflated. Any confidence they had that they could come against these guys went out the window. And it reminds me of the story of Rahab. When the men went to Jericho, Rahab said to the men, we have heard what your God did to the Egyptians, and it's only a matter of time before you are going to take us over. So therefore, remember me and my family. I think we need to so walk with God that when we're in difficult spots and God bring us out, people don't know that God is on your side. Right? And when God is on your side, then people must tremble. Would you agree? That's exactly what happened. They started to tremble. And they said, they recognized that God was their helper. So, based on the situation, based on how they come out, the people say, boy, God will with them people. God will with them people. Are you understanding? Now, I want you to understand that that is still true. That when we trust God and God brings us through difficult situations, people must recognize that God is with us. Are you saying? Are you seeing? And the people recognize that this work, which they did, was not so. Can I say it that way? It is not obvious this time though. It is God who was with them, and God brought them through. I want to encourage you that when you are in a difficult spot, don't give up, don't throw your arms in the air. Just remember that you can rely on God. It doesn't matter what the difficulty is. Finance, God can deal with it. Sickness, God can deal with it. Relationships, God can deal with it. Whatever the difficulty is, you have to remember that if God is on your side, hear the text. In all these things, you are more than what? Conquerors through Him who loves us. Now let's read verses 17 and 18 together. Also in those days, the nobles of Judah were sending many letters to Tobiah. And replies from Tobiah kept coming to them. For many in Judah were under oath to him, since he was son-in-law to Shechaniah, son of Ara, and his son Jehohanan had married the daughter of Meshullam, son of Berekah. So, what a thing. Here they are. Remember these same nobles that didn't want to bend their knees? the same nobles that were oppressing the people, all along they had some kind of link with Tobiah and Sanballat. So while they are working on the temple, here we find that Tobiah again, don't it? Tobiah again. And Tobiah was able to influence some of the persons, and he was trying to get his way into things. Notice what we are finding. The nobles were Tobiah's informers. So that is why every time he did something, Tobiah and Sanballat know what's going on. Because within the group, there were some informers that were taking news out to him. We have to be careful of that in the church of God. Because sometimes in the church of God, there are things that happen in the church of God that must stay in the church of God, but some people take it out and create problems. And what happened is that, notice what it says, the nobles were committed to Tobiah by oath. They had, I don't know what Tobiah did for them, because you know sometimes money drop, don't it? Or whatever. Don't know if that is the case. But you're going to see that there's a connection. And so, in the midst of everything, when you read the book, you kind of wonder, why is it that every move that he made, Tobiah and Sanballat knew? Well, now we know why. Because within the group, there were some persons who attached to him, and they were bringing news to him. And you know, I want to say that we have to always be careful, because the devil is always going to try to infiltrate any work of God, and he's going to have his henchmen, can I put it that way, who will carry and try to discredit the work. And the nobles were in awe of his connections. You notice he was married to some big dignitary, was related to the big dignitaries. We have to watch out, you know, even in church we find that sometimes because of connections, people make the wrong decisions and the wrong choices. And sometimes because of connections, people keep their mouth shut when they should. And sometimes because of connections, people talk when they shouldn't talk. Yeah, all that is coming out in this text, as you can see. Notice verse 19. Moreover, they kept reporting to me his good deeds, and then telling him what I said. And Tobiah sent letters to intimidate me. So they are the people in the midst that was going on and trying to mess up the things. Notice, the nobles defended Tobiah. That means every time, even though Tobiah was doing so many bad things, they were trying to give a good impression of him. I must say, sometimes in our political arena, even when we see people doing bad, there are persons who are going to cover them, don't you? And try to make them look better than they are. This is a real problem. And these nobles were totally sold into Tobiah. Notice Tobiah acted on the information that they provided. We said that before. So all the trouble that is coming to Nehemiah and those who are persistent in the work is coming because this group of persons were linked to Tobiah and to Sanballat. It seemed like Tobiah was really Sanballat's servant, if you go and read it. So therefore, the information will flow in that direction. And here, what I am saying, in spite of all of this, the work was completed in 52 days. Would you say glory to the Lord? Amen. Amen. They can't stop you. If God is on your side, they can't stop you. You have to know that. You have to know. The pressure will come, it will come hard, but if God is on your side, they can't stop you. Turn to your neighbor and say, they can't stop you. Tell them, can't stop you. Because in all these things we are what? More than conquerors through whom? Through him who loves us. We do not know how it will come. We do not know who will attack us, because the Bible is clear. There are some who come into sheep clothing, but they are really what? Wolves. Yeah, we're not talking about the animals. They are really wolves. They are there to create problems. But if you keep trusting God, God will give you the victory. Not saying you might not suffer some things, you know, because sometimes we go through some things. But what is true is that you will come up victorious. And that is what you have to keep in mind. God will not leave you alone. If you are faithful, God will not leave you alone. Tell your neighbor, God will not leave you alone. You can even use a finger. God will not leave you alone. What is important for us in the times of difficulty is that we remain faithful. This is why Moses could say to the people as he came to the Red Sea, stand still and see the salvation of God. These Egyptians you see now, you're not going to see them again. This is the last time. Take a good look. Because you will not see them again. Because God is going to work for you. When we don't know that, we get tricked by the enemy. When we don't know that, we come off the path of right and do wrong. But we must understand that if we say God and we are faithful to God, God will see us through. Alright, we have 4 verses in chapter 7 and then we're done. After the walls had been rebuilt and I had set the doors in place, the gatekeepers and the singers and the Levites were appointed. That's interesting. So he said, when everything was done, I made some appointments. Verse 1 of chapter 7. He appointed the gatekeepers. Now the gatekeepers clearly was to regulate who come in and who go out. Everybody can see that? Some persons have said that probably were gatekeepers to the temple. But clearly, since it mentioned the gate of the wall, I think it has to do with the regulation, the security of the place. And then we have to ask the question, why singers? And this is why I think some people believe it is speaking to the chapel situation. And then some people want to think that it has to do with worship. I really believe that if you look at it, singers are usually persons who are involved in worship. I think there is some way that what Nehemiah did is appointed some people to help them to remember that they must be thanksgiving, they must be grateful. I'll put it that way. I think that when we see God bring us through something, sometimes when we come out on the other side, we forget that this is God. And I think He wanted to keep constantly before them that you're not here by yourself. The victory is not because of you. The victory is because of the Lord. And therefore, there are always going to be people to remind you, let us give thanks because God has helped us. If you remember, after they came through the Red Sea, what happened? Then Miriam and the ladies danced. They took out the tambourine and they sing, who is like unto you? Glorious in holiness, faithful in praises, doing wonders. I think it is very easy for us to forget when God has given us victory. And I think Nehemiah never wanted them to forget that God had given them victory. And so he appointed some singers, some persons to rally the cry. It is also important when God has brought you through, that the next situation that faces you, you don't forget that God brought you through. And so it strengthens your faith to trust Him in this situation. You understand? If you forget that God brought you through, the possibility is that you will become afraid with the next situation. Yeah. It's like what happened to the men who went up to spy out the place, and 10 of them come back and say, we can't do it. And then 2 said, we can do it. It's the same God who brings us through there, so it's the same God who can bring us through now. Yeah. And sometimes when God has brought us through something difficult and hard, and we come through and we feel good, the next thing that come up, we start to back. Right? And we forget that the reality is that the same God who delivered you then is the same God who can deliver you now and tomorrow and next year and 10 years from now. And so I think the whole matter of the appointment of the singers is to keep before them the victory and to celebrate that victory to the glory of God. Then he appointed the Levites. Now we know the Levites were the persons who did all kind of work in the temple. And probably it is referring to the temple. I don't know. But one of the things that you have to remember, I want to take it this way. When you realize God is working for you, you must be working for God. Am I right? And some persons are happy about God doing things for them, but get them to get up and give a testimony. No? You can't do that. If God is working for you, if God has done many things for you, then you should be excited to do anything God asks you. Am I right? Yeah. You should be. In fact, normally when somebody does something for you in life, you show your gratitude, don't it? Yeah. Can you imagine then, when God brings them through such a difficult time, He wants them to remember that when God worked for you, then anything God asks you to do should be very light, should be very easy for you to do. I wish that we were in the church. would come to the place to understand that our whole life is about giving God glory. And therefore, any task that God asks us, we should run at it quickly, don't it? And give Him glory. Let's put verse 2 into perspective. It says, I put in charge of Jerusalem my brother Hanani, along with Hananiah, the commander of the citadel, because he was a man of integrity and feared God more than most men do. Now, the first question that we have to ask of the text, does this last statement, because he was a man of integrity, does it relate to Hanani or does it relate to Ananiah? English would seem to suggest that it relates to Ananiah, right? But if you look at the translation, you'll see that there are two commas. And usually when you have two commas, you bracket something. So if you bracket something, it doesn't fit into the general flow. So that its sentence at the bottom will relate to the original person. Let me see it again. I put in charge of Jerusalem my brother Hanani. You watching it? Comma. Along with Ananiah, the commander of the citadel. Right? Who is the central one? Hanani. Because he was a man of integrity and feared God more than most. Now, some people argue that the line relates to Hananiah. I want to think both of them were men like this. Right? So the question I have, is this nepotism? Is it nepotism? Is it because he's related to him by putting him in charge? We see a lot of that going on in Jamaica, don't it? Are you following the news? Boy, I tell you. All kind of things happening. So the question is that the reason? Well, I don't think so. I think the text gives us the reason. Because they were men who feared the Lord. I put my brother Hananiah in charge. But it is not because he was his brother. It was because he was a man of integrity. And if you think about it, it is the same Hananiah who brought the news in the first place that told him that the gates were broken down and the walls were down. So you know from the very beginning that he had an interest in what was going on. Right? And he said these men were men who were men of integrity. Notice, when I read this, I thought of Acts chapter 6. What happened in Acts chapter 6? It said that there were some problems. And Peter said, pick out some men of integrity. Fear God, fill up the Holy Spirit. Remember? And almost every time we talk about leadership, whether it's old or new, the key thing is whether those persons are God-fearing and people of integrity. Sometimes in church, some of the leaders we choose are not as God-fearing as they should be. And sometimes in churches, as we listen to the history that we have some people who are put in places, but they are not people of integrity. And so they dip their hand in the church money or something else. And you can go read the stories. There are many, many stories. Let me say to us tonight that when God called you to be a leader or just a member of the church, the first thing you must be is a person of integrity. I'm going to say it a little bit more. Notice, I also put Ananiah, the commander of the city, in charge. So that also speaks to the fact that Ananiah was a man of integrity. He was in charge of the city, don't he? A citadel. And then he had integrity and was God-fearing. I think both of them were persons of integrity and they were God-fearing. Notice it. The Acts passage says, brothers, choose 7 men from among you who are known to be full of the Spirit and wisdom. We will turn this responsibility over to them. It doesn't matter what task you have in the church. You know what task they had? They had the task of distributing food. And still they needed to be people of integrity. Because if not, they were talking about nepotism again, favoritism, remember? Yeah. Right? The Hebrew women was getting more than the Greek women. And it says, no, put somebody of integrity in charge of it. So that there's no favoritism. You won't watch no face. Everybody will be treated in a just manner. So it doesn't matter what position you have in the church or what duty you have. What is important is that you act with credibility. Are you with me? And so I would want to say the measure of a good leader is his character. The measure of a good leader is his character. If your character is right, then you'll go places. When your character is bad, you're going to have problems. And we are hearing so many scandals in Jamaica. We don't know if they're true or they're not true. Jamaican people say if it not go so, it go near so. So there's a possibility that some of these are difficulty. But we're just having too many of them. Too many of them. Too many of them. And I'm not here to pronounce whether it is so or it is not so. But the fact that we have so many issues say that the nation has a problem. Would you agree? The nation has a problem. And many churches have a problem too, because we have a lot of situations like that, where leaders do all kinds of things, and they cannot produce to show that they are above board. The man and woman of God must be above board. When you are a leader, you must be a person of character. Verse 3 reads, I said to them, the gates of Jerusalem are not to be opened until the sun is hot. Make them shut the doors and bar them. So shut them and put bars across them. Also appoint residents of Jerusalem as guards, some at their posts and some near their own houses. Why this seem like the security is very tight, don't it? Don't you say that? And again, restricted entry. Well, as I read this stuff and I look at the various researches that I was privy to, one of the things you notice at the middle day, it was siesta. A lot of people had siesta at that time. Why would you want to open the gate then? Or is it that you want to open the gate then? I'm not sure. Is it that until the sun is hot really mean midday, or did it mean not early? Maybe I think it meant not early. And you're going to see why I think so a little later on. Not early, not necessarily midday, but not early. And I think they wanted the gates to be closed and barred, but there was always a little gate where foot traffic can come in. Are you following? You know, like you see some big gate, but there's a little gate in it. That's how they made the gate. So the gatekeepers are to shut the doors and bar them to make sure that nobody can just walk in. Remember, one of the problems they had, if you go back to the first chapter, is that because there was no wall, there were no walls, animals could come in and people could attack them. Now they have built the wall for security purposes. Therefore, you can't just leave it open for everybody to come. Then you would have defeated the purpose for which you established the wall and the gate. Are you with me? Alright. And you're going to see why in a little bit. And not only are you to watch the gatekeepers are to do that, but those who have their houses, because they must also guard the areas where their houses were and stay at their posts. What you find is that if people can't get through the main gate, they might try to come over near your house. So he says you must keep a watch. Some persons put this in a spiritual context, and I think it's okay to do that. That one of the things as leaders do in a church is we must have the doors closed. What do I mean by that? You can't let everybody to come and preach in your church, because they will bring wrong doctrine in. You understand? If you have the oversight of a church and you are directing them in the Word of God, you must be very careful who comes into your pulpit and preach, because they can come in and do serious damage. So you always have to be careful that you know who's going to go in your pulpit and preach. Apart from that, it is important for us who are care group leaders who interact with our members to help them to realize that some of the things they hear outside is not Bible. You have to guard people against the wrong things that they hear. One of the problems we have many times when young people are in school, especially when they're in high school or they're in university, they meet up on a group that say if you don't talk in tongues, you're not a Christian. The Bible don't teach that. And those people in that group are very aggressive. And so you have to help the people here to understand what the Bible says and to stand for it. And so those of us who we must guard the gate. We must not allow anything to come in to what you're doing. Alright, so we are up to the last verse. Now the city was large and spacious, but there were few people in it. and the houses had not yet been built. So this is the reason why you needed close watch. Because if the city is large and spacious, that means people coming and in places that you don't know. And I think this is the reason why he was saying you have to be very strict. Don't leave any room for people to come in and do any damage in the city. I think that when we're church leaders and we're church members, we must not leave loopholes for people to come in and do damage to the church or damage to the members of the church. I think it's very important. And as a result of that, the rest of chapter 7, which we won't take, the rest of chapter 7, how many verses? I think go down to 70-something verses. It's a list of names of persons, which also is in the book of Ezra. A list of persons, of names of persons that you can't pronounce, and I can't pronounce many of them myself. But what they were doing was getting the register in places to who they could invite to populate the city, because the city only had a few people in it. So we're going to jump over to chapter 8 next, because chapter 7 is very long. I have a lot of names that are very hard to pronounce. But I want to say this, God recognized every individual, and I think that's why that listing is there, as well as when you go to Numbers and you see the census and so. So you can be sure that you as an individual, God recognized you as important, right? But he said the city was large with a lot of space, and the inhabitants were few. It had only few houses, and for this reason, then you needed to have a tighter security, because if the security slack, then people will come in. You know, one of the things that we find in Jamaica very often, somebody move out of a house and it leave empty for a while, and what happened? They capture it, right? Unfortunately, that is true. Here we find Nehemiah is trying not for that to happen. He has done a lot of work to get this wall up, to get the gates in place, and he said, we don't want anybody to come here, come squat and take over. We have to be careful in the church, because sometimes the devil bring people in that come in and want to take over the church. Yes, and lead it astray. We have to be careful who we let in. I keep saying that because that is so important. And one of the reasons why they went through the list was to see those who are pure Jews and those who are not, and how they were going to let people in the city. Remember, they had villages around, you know, but the city itself didn't have a lot of people, because the walls were broken down and the gates were burned and persons were not feeling safe in it. But now that that was established, it was time to bring the people in. Can I say that it is now time to bring people into the church? Because the gospel must go forth, because Jesus will return. And people need to come into the security of Jesus, come under the security of the gospel of Jesus Christ. Because when they are outside of the church, when they are outside of Christ, I should say, then the reality is that they are doomed for destruction. And we need to make haste to populate this space. Even as we put up this wing, we need to ensure that the church is full again, and then we have to do something else. This time turn it so and carry it out so. And I'm looking forward to that. I build an amphitheater. Yes? So we have enough space. Because from one corner of Whitfield Town to the next, the name of this church must go forward. That God is in this place. Just like how the people heard. Yes? They trembled. Yes? Because the walls are finished. The people in this community must tremble because God is in this place. And therefore, from one end of Whitfield Town to the next end of Whitfield Town, this church must be known and people must come in. Bless the Lord. We're going to give him thanks. It's the first night back in the sanctuary for Bible study. And we go forward to chapter 8 next week.